Hey everyone, I'm making a video on AI Thinkers, my talk I gave on August 3rd, and the topic was about Company of Zero and how we leverage Cloudflare Workers and AI capabilities to really manage a AI company on the cloud. The dream of this project was really about enabling founders to start multiple companies, right? As human individuals, we're still liable for the LLCs, the C Corp, S Corp we have, but how do we do things more agentically? The principle of the project initially started very simple. We need knowledge markdown files, and the format I picked is Google's OKF, open knowledge format. And then the other requirement is that we need a way to have AI reach out to owners versus having owners reach out to AI. And so with those two major requirements, we set on a journey to build the AI Thinkers project that I presented here. So the first topic of the talk was about the engine and the many brains. So here we have the engine. Engine has a bunch of capabilities that lets the knowledge and then the capabilities live on CloudFront, and it lets searches, it has integrations. So engine is where all the code is. And the idea here is that one engine can power many companies. And then the engine is a public GitHub repository that anyone watches this video can use. And then the engine is also enabled to support multiple brains. Now, the brain is the real knowledge. The brain has 0 lines of code, right? So we kind of made a very deterministic choice here. The brain has 0 lines of code. The brain has a bunch of markdown files, and that's it. And maybe some JSON files for configuration, but 0 lines of code are written inside the brain. And the idea here is that all the knowledge about your company are stored in knowledge graphs and in open in OKRs. So sorry, OKFs. So it's really important to understand that the brain can be many of them, and they all run on the engine. And how it actually works is that the brain picks a version that's tagged in the main branch here, so that if your brain's not ready to upgrade to the latest element mesh, you don't need to. And then one thing that's really cool, I think is really cool, that because we're doing agentic orchestration versus deterministic loop orchestration type of style, the whole thing is really stored in a place where the engine can configure its own. The brain itself can configure its own capabilities. So, for example, in this sample brain, that's from my made up company, has these 5 capabilities, right? Has these 5 roster agents, and they all do different things, which we'll talk about much later. So the idea here is that the brain can, so that the capabilities, each brain can define how many agents they want. And then next, we need to really talk about the actual lower level. So now we understand brain and the engine are different repositories. Well, what does the brain actually look like, right? So the brain has the knowledge of the company, right? So a lot of the things is based on the whole second brain concept, right? Except this is for a company. So you clearly want all the episodic memories, or the different types of memories, all stored in one place. Decisions, constitutions, all that stuff that works for second brain for humans would be obviously stored here. And then here we're doing something that's maybe more unique, more different, is that we have agents that's running on Cloudflare that can check out the brain and take operations on it. And the one thing to note is that the GitHub instance of the brain is every agent's source of truth. Every agent tries to commit to it if they do a thing, and then the chief of staff kind of puts everything together at the end of the day and sends it to the CEO of the company, who is actually human. And then all the things that everyone else does would be kind of done after the fact. And the whole thing is running on Cloudflare Workers, which means that the whole thing is basically free, because we're using fractional serverless compute that runs under the Cloud Workers limits. And then the third one really talks a little bit about the sequence of how this actually happens. So when we think about a company of zero, how we think about deploying this on the cloud is basically for each agent that needs to run whenever the beat happens, the agent themselves will run, and then later on, the chief of staff will run that will get everyone's results together. The reason why it's so decoupled is so that A, we want to run things for free on Cloudflare, and B, we really want to maximize the brain's capability to customize each brain, right? So each company should have its own staff, right? So the idea here is that's very decoupled. And then also this concept where, because this is my most decoupled agentic architecture, if 2 or 3 agents were to fail, the whole thing doesn't fail, right? So let's say you have 20 agents, you have 40 agents, right, in your company. If 2 or 3 of them fail, that's fine. It gets reported as a failure, but it doesn't crash the whole process, right? So each one of them, just like people, right? People take sick days, right? That's fine. The company still keeps going. Yes, their work is not performed that day, and that's maybe okay, right? So it's kind of like that concept. The fourth concept I talked about in the Columbus AI Thinkers thing is reach, right? Just like humans, I sometimes need to reach into a file cabinet because I don't have perfect memory of, let's say, the 10 companies I'm running, like in theory, right? So I will need to sometimes read a piece of paper that I might have read 2 years ago and dig something up, right? Something with AI, like we don't need everything in open knowledge format. However, we do need, just like humans, AI also need to be able to reach into like your SharePoint, your Google Drive, and all that stuff. And then during the demo and this project, right now we're a little bit Microsoft based, so we're using Microsoft's graph system to fetch files, and we have an entity for this as well. The idea here is that the brain doesn't need all the knowledge, just like human brains don't need all the knowledge. The brain needs to know where to get the files out of SharePoint or out of Google Drive. Again, this demo right now, it's built for SharePoint, but it can easily be extended to Google Workspace as well. And then number 5, we touched on this a little bit, but it's a really big part of the goal is that I want every single line of code checked into the code base that's open source, and each company or each brain has its own markdown files, and it's very, very deterministic. It's done that way so that the brain can be enhanced. The engine can be enhanced for everyone, and the brain, right, is an entity of the engine. I think that's a new way I'm thinking about my open source project is that if I have something that's very private, I don't want to outsource, that's fine. I want to separate the knowledge from the engine. And then the last step, what I talked about in Columbus, is that because the brain is all markdown files, 0 lines of code, sometimes when the brain's executing, right, AI is fairly smart, it realizes that there's a bug in the engine, right? However, the brain can only modify capabilities in its own brain, right? It cannot modify the engine. So what AI would do, at least right now, is that AI would open an issue, right? So if I were to look at the issues tab here, all 5 of these issues are open. I know it says my name, but all 5 of these issues were opened by AI, where the brain ran into an issue with deterministic code that's part of the engine. And the brain has no ability to fix it because the brain can only modify its own markdown files. So what the brain does instead is that the brain has the capability to open an issue automatically without any humans doing anything in here, so that me, as the maintainer of the engines, can look, oh, this brain had this issue, right? And then my AI then looked at it and believed it and then made a fix. Right, so this is where it's very cool to me that that each brain can open issues just like humans would open issues on a GitHub project when it runs into issues on a code base they don't control. And then the last thing I demoed, this took a little bit longer in Columbus AI, is I asked the question, is like, hey, because let's say my fictitious company, they have my Accenture non-compete. I still work for Accenture. I was like, hey, with my Accenture non-compete, can I still present at AI Thinkers Columbus? Is it okay? Or is it going to be something that might violate my terms of service? So what AI did is AI, during the demo, read in my non-compete from Accenture, opened up the PDF, and then answered my question to the thing. And this does something if you think that's pretty powerful. AI didn't just read from its knowledge graph. AI read from the knowledge graph, opened the document, triaged it, and then understood what it could be done. However, the crux of the engine, the powerful part of this whole thing, wasn't demoable, since I don't want to. If I have a company, I don't want to show the real demo, the real data. The real powerful part is that AI reaches out to owners versus the other way around, right? Because a lot of times when people use AI, they sit down, they type it into AI, right? Very seldomly does AI take the mental load, take the friction off of you, and have the agentic orchestration capability to organize its 10, 25 workers, and then reaches out to you what's missing, right? Like, like that's the only way, at least to me, a human can run 10 companies by him or herself, is if the friction, the mental load is taken off of the individual and put it into an agentic orchestration layer. Thank you so much if you watched my video, and I hope you have a great day.